Hello, everybody. Welcome to the DePINedPodcast. I'm your host, Tom Trowbridge. We're excited to bring you interviews with the key founders in the DePIN landscape, investors, and ecosystem partners. This is an exciting time for DePIN, and this year we're going to be meeting even more founders, learning about the projects that they're building, about the traction they're getting, and about the revenue that they're generating. The podcast is brought to you by Fluence. Fluence is building a decentralized compute platform. It's a project I'm a co-founder of and really excited about. So buckle up for this year. Please subscribe to the channel, listen to us on Spotify or Apple. And of course, if you are around any of the large conferences, come to our DePIN Day, where you can meet these founders on the Fluence team in person and hear from all the ecosystem partners as well. So look forward to seeing you in person, and let's get going on this podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the DePIN podcast. I'm your host, Tom Trowbridge. I'm thrilled to be here with Arthur, who is the CEO of POKT Network. Welcome, Arthur.
Hey, thanks. It's nice to be here. I appreciate being invited on this awesome podcast.
And for those who don't know, and everyone should know, but POKT is one of the early DePIN projects, founded around 2019, listed token 2020. So really great to have kind of an old school DePIN project here that's surviving, thriving, and I think is at a pretty interesting inflection point. So Arthur, why don't you get into it and talk to us about what POKT does and where it's going?
Sure, yeah. So POKT is a decentralized protocol, just like most of your guests here on a decentralized protocol for infrastructure. For us, it's providing access. Currently, we provide decentralized censorship-resistant blockchain access. But in the very near future, we have built a way to expand that outside of Web3 to go to provide LLM inferencing for various open source LLMs, to provide access to open source speech protocols such as Nostr, which is a Bitcoin alternative for speech, Farcaster. And we've also found ways to get this working with Signal, the app. That's something personally that I got to do, which was a lot of fun since I'm not really coding these days. And also got it working with Tor, right, that old school onion router protocol. So POKT is basically decentralized data transport is how to think about it. But in a more easier way to think about it is POKT Network provides a list of, it is a directory of services or open source services. And the company that I represent, so I'm part of Grove, we're the labs team that POKT Network spun out of. We build a quality filter or a filter that filters the best nodes in our network of services for the end user. And we also build POKT Network itself.
Awesome. So tell us, that is it's a relatively technical explanation. Can you back up and explain what decentralized access means? It's kind of how that works for people from a couple of layers up.
So I'll do it by example. I'll do it by example. So periodically, everyone here has used MetaMask at some point or another, MetaMask being the wallet by Infura, by consensus. MetaMask allows you to interact with various Web3 projects, be it DEXs or lending protocols, prediction markets, what have you. And they use a centralized provider to access Ethereum and all the various L2s that are built, that are EVMs, or Ethereum virtual machines, or Ethereum compatible. And periodically, those, when Infura goes down, and I'm not knocking them, this happens to everyone, no one can access the specific blockchains that they're trying to access because the pipe that accesses the Ethereum nodes that are centralized and self-hosted by Infura are down. They're unavailable. It's the same thing as AWS or Google Cloud go down and the internet goes down completely. Like you can't access Facebook, you can't access X, you can't access Telegram or any of these other social protocols because the main centralized provider is no longer able to service traffic because something in the pipeline between your computer or your mobile device or your browser and the actual service you're trying to reach goes down. And that is kind of a fault of having a centralized provider. So what POKT does is it coordinates access on the demand side. It allows multiple people to drive demand into a protocol that then provides access to a bunch of redundant nodes. So it's as if you are trying to go to X as an example, and AWS is down, but X has a copy of itself on Google Cloud. So now you can be routed automatically to Google Cloud by some type of smart load balancer. So what we have done and what we've done is we've basically built a network that incentivizes and coordinates a group of DevOps engineers, people who stand up servers, who stand up multiple duplicates, redundant infrastructure for all of the top blockchains and soon to be open source LLMs. And we have also begun providing multiple ingress or entry points into the network so that if Grove, as an example, which provides access to Pocket Network, goes down, you can go to one of our other providers like Chainstack or Liquify or these other RPC providers.
Really interesting. And then what is the infrastructure that's necessary to provide that? You mentioned nodes. Where's the DePIN component of people's?
Sure. So early on, people were just standing up nodes on centralized clouds. But what's happened over time as the market became competitive and as we entered a bear market in the early 2020s is to stay competitive. Folks have bought either data centers or have begun renting and standing up their own rack space in their own data centers. We have a couple of folks that I know. One fun story is we have a former doctor who bought a bunch of real estate, I think, out in Ohio, which is part of like the US East chain for traffic. US East region for Google and AWS have a lot of their traffic going, and bought a warehouse space there and turned it into basically a server farm. And so they buy a bunch of hardware and set up a route request there. We have a lot of folks who have rented bare metal space or hosted bare metal or cloud bare metal space all over the world in any region that is supported. We typically see this in three parts of the world, namely between near Frankfurt in Germany or Amsterdam in the Netherlands, in Singapore for the APAC region, and again, as I said, US East, which is Virginia, New York, New Jersey, Ohio area. So we have people that have either self-hosted their own data centers or have rented bare metal clouds to be able to reduce their capital expenditures when servicing requests for Pocket Network.
And is that then? And what's interesting is that these are, professionally oriented data centers. So this is not retail oriented, network. Is also fair?
Yes, but if I can dive a little deeper, there is the ultimate vision for Pocket Network, and then there is the current reality. So if you look at any project, you look at either their white paper or their initial genesis, you have the thesis. And the thesis for Pocket Network is in the future, eventually, the belief is any single individual should be able to set up their own ingress point, their own entry point into Pocket Network. And any somewhat specialized individual or someone using some type of library will be able to spin up infrastructure to host on their either cloud at home or bare metal provider in a region or part of the world which is cost efficient, or do something in the States or in other developed parts of the world where they have deals with cable companies or electric companies where they can process requests. That are kind of like when you look at Bitcoin miners and how they're trying to become more efficient over time. But where we are in the world, or where we are right now, is we need on both the demand side, the people providing access, and then on the supply side, the people providing infrastructure, we need them to be generalist and technical. So on the supply side, we have node operators or specialist DevOps engineers that have built custom infrastructure to run and update blockchain nodes. And they run more than one. They're not specializing in just EVMs. They run in the Solana ecosystem. They run in the Move ecosystem, and so on and so forth. And on the demand side, most of the types of clients that we service are multi-chain clients. They're not individuals looking to access one specific chain or one or two specific chains. They're looking to be there like DEXs or lending platforms, prediction markets, you name it, games, et cetera, et cetera. And they tend to be multi-chain products. And so where we are today is you have multi-chains specialists that are driving traffic into the network because it takes some level of technical skill to do this. And on the supply side, multi-chain specialists providing the infrastructure processing the traffic.
What I think is interesting is that it still takes a level of resource and sophistication to contribute to the network. And that is not true for a lot of DePIN projects. It's like, hey, download this browser extension. You're good. We'll scrape the web. Listen, have your phone download this app, and now we can do X, Y, Z, or put this thing in your car and you're good. Like, this is a level of sophistication above that, but it's also providing a sophistication, a service of a sophistication and complexity, which is not just a data collection.
Correct. A lot of these services are just like, hey, I think with Helium, like, hey, there is a point here. The service might be okay, might not be the best, but you have some access. But when you're dealing with something with access and you're trying to compete in a market full of centralized providers, you have to prove that this product is worthwhile. You have to compete on things like latency, and you cannot have a random individual just trying to compete on latency, because when you work with blockchain specifically and you're working multiple ones that are growing in size over time, you need to know how to keep them up. You need to know how to provision new hardware or install it manually yourself. You get to a point where dispatching a load balancing request it becomes just as difficult as actually servicing that request that comes into your server and making sure it is processed. So yeah, we are at that level of sophistication right now, even though we are a 7-8-year-old project and we've been live on mainnet for 5 years. It is still, for the foreseeable future, going to be, it's going to require that level of sophistication on both sides of the market.
And listen, I think that's fine. I mean, Fluence has a similar perspective, which is we're decentralized compute. And in order to compete with the clouds, the customers need to understand that they have the same facilities they're using as the Web 2 giants. And so it's also an easier technical problem for us to solve if we're dealing in top tier data centers with professional providers. And so all of our onboarded, compute is at top tier data centers. It's not running off of people's laptops. And so that is, I think, a similar sort of at least philosophical need that we've, done down the road. We'd love to be able to have the sophistication where we can kind of divide up compute jobs and have it run completely, in thousands of PCs around the world. But that is a much more challenging problem to solve. And we got to sort of do bit by bit.
I agree. I think there is to get into the technical nuance just for a moment, there is a world where we could have a pocket box, because what a pocket box basically does is it's big hard drive, and which, as long as it's connected to the internet, you'll be able to get a request sent to you. But what you'd have to do is then create deals with people who stand up actual full nodes or archival nodes, like actual blockchains themselves, not just the pocket box. So the pocket basically acts as a relayer. It relays or proxies requests from the gateway that sends a request into the network to the actual node itself. And what we've seen on our end is not all of the people who provide access to Pocket Network are also running their own nodes. Like, there are more Pocket nodes. We have tens of thousands of Pocket nodes, but there's only a handful of providers. It's called 100 or so, 100 unique instances of given full nodes. So so there is a world where, I don't know how it would work exactly for Fluence, but for Pocket, because of the low level of data that is being proxied, we could create hardware and put in everyone's house, just like, forgot what the name of that box, Umbrel, like Umbrel does for the open source and Pocket Bitcoin ecosystem, as an example. It's like a little box that has like 2 terabytes of space, has a bunch of apps installed on it, and proxies requests.
Gotcha. And that I think that is, you could enter the node sale market with something like that down the road. But Aether did that to great success relatively recently. Not obviously exactly your space, but the same box selling concept that does stuff. And then, well, listen, that's really interesting. Why don't you back up for a second and tell us about your journey to Pocket and how that kind of how you ended up in the role?
Sure, it's a really fun little story. So my background, I have multiple degrees in physics, and then I graduated with my master's in physics in 2011. I dropped out of a PhD program at the time, and I went into mobile engineering, which was very big, early days. I worked my way up for like 10, 11 years. I ended up running a bunch of stuff at Capital One at the very end of my mobile engineering career. But somewhere in between, I did what I'm doing with you right now. I did podcasts and I did the conference circuit. And I met an individual by the name of Michael at work. And at the time, he was looking to become an iOS engineer. We met on Twitter. He pinged me about something. I helped him get his first job. We kept in touch. He pivoted to learning about Ethereum. And he started building a project with a few of his friends down in Tampa. And turned out that when they were building the project, Consensus was basically the only real big provider of blockchain access to Ethereum. And keep in mind, this is early days. So there were only so many blockchains. This was like during the ICO days. There were only so many blockchains that had launched. At that point in time, he realized that there was a problem. Like they pivoted what they were trying to build in the space, like some smart contracts, to building what is now known as Pocket Network. So I'm not the original founder of Pocket. So he and his original founder started building out the project in 2017, 2018. And they built the first version of Pocket, launched it in, I think, summer of 2020, if I recall. I forget the exact date. It was like the 28th of July or August 2020, maybe September. And they launched it. And over time, that was when the boom times, the last bull market. And they realized, okay, so we are an organization. We have a foundation. The foundation is part of the actual organization known as Pocket Network Incorporated. And we need to build all the things. We need to build all the features we need to build a wallet and build a better Explorer. And we need to build better tooling for onboarding stakers and build better tooling for running nodes and create all these partnerships and start selling. And so they hired me because Mike and I kept in touch, and Mike knew I had kind of a career building tech at scale, right? To hundreds of millions of people. I've built open source code for 20 years of my life at that point, since I was a child. And I came in to lead engineering. And, as happens at companies that scale too quickly, we scaled very quickly. There was turnover, there was some infighting, and one thing led to another. And people either burned out or decided that they wanted to move on to something else. And it turned into now myself and two other people kind of co-founded the company back in 2023. We named it to Grove with one of the original founders, Michael. Michael went off to our foundation. He's still there right now, so he's still involved in the project. And I am now kind of leading the ship at Grove to deliver on a lot of the promises that were in the initial white paper. So where we are today is we just shipped a new version of Pocket Network. It's an upgrade. We call it Shannon. The current version of Pocket we call Morse. The current version Morse was a Tendermint fork that was launched, as I said, 5 years ago. The new version Shannon is a Cosmos SDK vendored version of the network. And by doing it that way, we're no longer on an island. When we created a fork, we became an island. We had to build all the tooling. It took forever to get added to DEXs. Now being on Cosmos, we get IBC compatibility, we get easy XLR bridging, we get access to the Keplr wallet. We have stable coins that we can actually now launch on Pocket, and we have some ideas around that. So that's where we are now. So we have a small team now. It's about 8-9 people, almost all fully engineers. We use AI tremendously, so everyone basically 10x's themselves every day. Even I'm coding, even though I'm not supposed to be coding at this job, but I'm coding and doing BD and everything else because I can. So yeah, that's kind of the story. Physicist turned engineer turned CEO, now piloting the ship into the uncharted waters. It's been a lot of fun. Very exciting.
Really interesting. Well, yeah, I mean, quite the evolution for a DePIN project. And listen, there's a number that have been around for that amount of time, right? We can think of, but you guys are in that space. Fluence was founded around then, so was, a bunch of storage guys, right? Like I think Arwe wasn't too far from there. Filecoin, of course, storage, like a bunch of these guys. So there is a whole generation of projects from back then that have survived and have, keep executing. How do you guys think about metrics for success? You mentioned nodes, you mentioned, how do you gauge scale and fit?
So early on in the project, it was how many nodes do we have? And we have 50,000 at some point. But the supply side was oversaturated, and we're still oversaturated right now. I think we're at like 12 to 13,000, closer to 13,000. The supply metric the metric that I think about now is from Grove's vantage point, right? So I am the CEO of a equity-based business that is also a labs team. So we build the protocol, but I also have to accrue value to the equity of the company for the investors that we have. And so what I have realized a long time ago, but what we're executing now and doing a decent job, it should be a much better job later on this summer, is the KPI I'm looking to say is decentralized. It's demand from distributed providers. So it's like how many unique gateways or unique sovereign providers of blockchain access or LLM access or data access to Pocket can we onboard, and how much data do they feel comfortable sending? So as an example, Chainstack is an RPC provider. Liquify is an RPC provider. Infura, Alchemy, QuickNode, they're all RPC providers. So a lot of them are household names for folks building in the space. If you're a creator building an app, you're most likely using one of these 5 providers. All of them use Grove as a way to access Pocket for different reasons. But the ideal is for them to go around Grove and to actually access Pocket directly and then feel comfortable with the service that Grove offers, or Pocket offers rather, so that the number of requests that they send to the network grows up and to the right over time. And the goal for Grove is to also increase the number of sovereign entry points, sovereign operators to provide that data. So can we go from just RPC providers relaying their traffic to Pocket Network to other types of apps that need blockchain access and in the future access to LLMs, doing it themselves without having to go through Grove directly. So the metric, again, is having relays go up and to the right from a increasing amount of demand aggregators is how I would think about it.
And does a network charge on a per byte, megabyte, gigabyte basis? How does the economics work?
So the economics is one of the issues we've had. And this is, all founders have disagreements. So Mike and I had our own disagreements on here. I've always believed that the network needs to charge. And we tried an experiment a couple years ago where we charged 85 cents for 1 million requests. And we didn't charge depending on the heaviness of the request. Was it a very large request or a small request? It was just any request. And at that point in time, we were doing something like $30,000 to $31,000 in monthly protocol revenue. So it adds up to like $360,000. Well, that experiment ended after a year and a half because it was a nominal fee. It wasn't doing any favors to the node runners. We were minting way more than we were burning. So with the version of we're recording this on April 7th. We launched the new version of Pocket at the end of March. But what we're doing with this new version of Pocket is we're migrating all liquidity and all state to the new version. And that'll be launched sometime in early, end of April, early May. When we do that, we're going to turn on a new tokenomics where mint equals burn. So as an example, these are hypothetical numbers. These are not real. But let's say it costs 1 Pocket token, POKT, 1 Pocket token to send a request. The protocol would burn that 1 Pocket token, and then whatever node would process the request will mint 0.8 tokens, and the foundation, the DAO, we have a DAO, would get 0.2 tokens. So mint equals burn, but the amount of tokens going into liquid hands, node runners who need to pay for their service, would be less than the amount that's burned. And we consider the DAO to be more or less an illiquid source of funds because they tend not to spend their funds too often. So the tokenomics are going to go mint equals burn, but net deflationary for node operators is how to kind of think about it. This is the current experiment. We are discussing this in our forum, in our DAO right now. We're looking to land at a price of $2.50 per million requests, which is sizable. It actually changes Grove's business model, right? So our business model is being the first and largest provider of access to Pocket Network, but not the only one. And as I said moments ago, our goal is to have people not even use Grove to access Pocket, but to incentivize and provide tooling for other people to access Pocket directly. But for the time being, we still have to act as an RPC provider directly. And we currently charge $2 per million. So if we have to just spend $2.50 per million to burn Pocket, we have to burn that much worth of Pocket just to send 1 million requests, we can no longer be charging $2 per million. So we're changing our prices as well to adapt. And in talking to our customers for the last couple of weeks, since we've begun discussing this decision in earnest. Everyone seems to be okay with this right now. So to give you an idea of how much would the protocol make at $2.50 per million, doing what we do now as a network between 5 and 600 million requests per day, that's about $500,000 in protocol revenue. However, we have a lot of people that are waiting for WebSockets, another way to transport data to be turned on. And looking at the past history, we believe easily we can get to over 2 billion requests in the next few months. So that will put protocol revenue close to $2 million per year. So we'll get there. I'm not really worried about this.
And how does that pricing $250 per million requests compare to centralized RPC providers or others?
So it's still much cheaper. So the idea so the question is, you haven't asked this question, but I'm gonna ask the question, answer the question, and then answer the one that you asked. So the question is, why would a centralized provider want to use something like POKT if they have a full vertical integration, right? They own the nodes, they own the racks, they own the nodes, they have a specific version of a blockchain client installed because there's multiple clients, and then they pay for the routing of requests. What would incentivize a node runner to forego using their own, what they've already paid for in CapEx and put that money into OpEx, right? For the actual cost for the service itself. And so the answer there is multifold depending on who you talk to. One, POKT Network offers access to over 60 blockchains and all in archival form. And most of these people who have CapEx invested do not have anywhere near that amount of access because it costs a lot of money and a lot of human capital to maintain access. So what these people tend to do is they become resellers of our service. So they will offer, as an example, Sonic just came out, right? The Phantom successor. So a lot of folks are using, they don't hold any service Sonic nodes. They host nothing. They just resell our service. One example is they will resell us for our breadth. Two, folks will come and use us for as a backup provider. So sometimes they get surge traffic during days like where we are today, which is potentially some form, April 7th, some form of a Black Monday given the tariffs. There is we're seeing an increased spike in relays as well as people are trying to get in or out of their positions. And in that world, these centralized providers may not have enough hardware allocated to process requests, so we will become a failover provider. So first, we are our breadth of services. Second is failover. And third, a lot of these providers tend to have upgrade cycles where they need to update their hardware, but they don't want to lower their service, so we become their backup provider. So the question is, when you put all of this in, is $2.50 per million cheaper than what it is that they would have to charge to support all of these offerings? And for everyone that we've talked to, for most of their customers, yes. But like any business, a lot of it's enterprise customers, and the enterprise customers which send large volume relays will require, have cheaper than $2.50 per million. And that was a worry of mine until I started chatting with all these providers. And they said, for the combination of services that we offer, being a backup, being a provider of access to long tails of chains, or being a redundant provider, or like a provider for new services, it's much cheaper for them to pay a little premium because they're able to capture more customers on their end, even if they're paying a little more now. So that's kind of like, reduces the headaches. And in the future, they're using us now, so they're going to be paying us $5, but this is the incentive for them to go directly to POKT. But then if they're having, the POKT has never, POKT has had a couple chain halts very early on. POKT itself has no real issues. The issues are, I'll get to this too because it's interesting, is when you have a permissionless network, like I said, we're a permissionless network of services. A permissionless network is by its very nature adversarial, meaning that people will try to game the system, especially if there's some form of incentives built in. What Grove does is we build a quality filter on top that not only optimizes for the best, and what it does is it optimizes for the best node, where best is the fastest reachable node, one that is following all the rules that were set up, which is you have to be an archival chain, you have to be using a certain clients, like Geeth or Geth, as an example, if you want to access certain trace capabilities or things of that nature. So that is what Grove is doing, because that is what we've seen in trying to sell RPC access on a decentralized adversarial network for so many years. Our goal is now to be able to resell this to others. So having a fixed amount having the protocol tokenomics fixed at $2.50 per million, having software that is battle tested for 5 years with our own customers, and having a network that has 60 plus providers is more than enough incentive for a centralized provider to come and attempt or try to use us, especially if they've been using us anyway as their backup provider directly. Now they can do it without using us.
And so if I also think about this just bigger picture value proposition, there is a price parity, potentially discount, but it's also just a service, a service performance redundancy value proposition combined with the duration of the service you've offered that makes it trusted. So it's not, and this is, I think, really important, it's not just competing on price. And I think that's also a real important element of a lot of DePINs, where it's not just, hey, we're cheaper, so go use it. That certainly can be the case for some, but it's also providing something that is different and has other attributes that are very hard to replicate.
I will say one corollary note. We have a bunch of dexes that use us that you've heard, but for reasons I'm not going to name, like one of them will use us because we're the cheapest. So when we periodically, our service degrades at the Grove layer, not Pocket, right? Pocket's been great. But when our own infrastructure and load balance from Crust degrades for whatever reason, they will wait us out. They will come back to us the moment we're on. So price is a factor at times. But at $2.50 or even at $5, we are still an order of magnitude cheaper for most large scale service generators or request generators.
Gosh. Well, and help me understand then the economics of the node providers or the other people in the network. Are they there? You said they're paid. So first of all, what you mentioned, or I think first, is it sounds like it's fiat pricing, which is great. Like I'm a huge supporter of that. So whatever $2 is, if your token's at $1, it's 2.5, it's at 10 cents, it's 200, whatever it is. But that is makes complete sense to me. And then that is then used to mint a token at the same time in two parts, 20% to one, 80 to another. And that 80% then goes to those, whichever provider was serving that job. Is that right?
Correct. So there's some nuances that I'm going to avoid, but basically whenever an application tries to send a request, the gateway, the Grove, as an example, it says, hey, Pocket Network, provide me a set of nodes that can process a base request, as an example, for trying to send something, the L2 on ETH known as base. And so a subsection of those nodes are sent, right? Not the entire set. And then Grove's stuff filters those nodes for the best node for that request. So if this request is coming from Taipei, as an example, it'll be routed to Singapore. And one of the nodes that was returned that's in the Singapore region, if it is the latest node, if it's at the tip of the blockchain, and if there's a bunch of other nuances that need to be, a bunch of other
criteria
checks that are put in place. Yeah. I don't want to, just like I was listening to your backlog, and just like the guy that you had on last from Titan said, like, you don't want to kind of say all the nuances of how the checks happen because you don't want people to game it. The best node is chosen, and the person who provided that node runner and the person who provided liquidity to that node runner split the profits. So this is the nuance of, I'm sure this works. This is slightly different than how this may work with other networks. So we have two types of nodes. We have validator nodes, which are block producers. And these validator nodes can also service requests. And then we have servicer nodes, which just service requests. They don't do any type of block production. Servicer nodes have a rev share in place with the actual node operator. So as an example, let's do this one token. Example, if one token is what the cost was to dispatch a request in a network, that one token was burnt by the protocol. And if this node in Singapore was chosen, let's call it Tom's node. Tom's node. Tom's node will mint 0.8 new tokens, and the DAO will get 0.2. And of those 0.8 new tokens, let's say, Harry, some other individual, Harry provided the liquidity to stake that node. So Harry has a deal with Tom where Harry gets 80% of that token and Tom gets 20%. So Tom will end up getting 20% of 0.8 pockets. And Harry will get 80% of 0.8 pockets.
Listen, we have the same, I call out two pieces that architecture is similar to Fluence. One's reverse, but first you've separated staking from node providing and node provisioning. I think that's super important. We've done the same thing. A lot of projects, the only people who can stake are the ones who actually run and operate the node or infrastructure or wherever it is. So I think that we're very aligned on that. The funny thing for us is that the economics are reversed, where it's actually the 20, and the market will determine this, but we started off with 20% going to the stake provider, 80% to the hardware provider. So it's interesting to see kind of where that all shakes out down the road. And for us, the market will determine it. We just sort of started the thing, that division that way, but I expect it to fluctuate based on a whole number of factors.
For us, it's going to be the same. We expect an automated bartering system that we're building to be put in place, and where the 20/80 between the node runners and the stakers, that is where the average is right now. Like we have some providers that charge 10% and some providers that charge 60%. It depends also on the price of the token at the time. It's very manual right now. And that part will always be manual. But the part that will be automated in the future for us is the actual cost of dispatcher relay. We're setting it at $2.50 per million, and we'll be doing a 7-day backlook to see how many requests were processed, how much money was burned, and we'll be updating it manually. The DAO will, with the protocol parameter change. But in the future, all of that should be automated. And because of that, I believe that certain sophisticated node operators will be automating the rev share as well. And that will become kind of the name of the game in the future, right? Because all of this goes down to the price of this token that, for better or worse, acts as security for the network, but also acts as a payment vehicle, the medium of exchange.
It does. And what your network subtly does is it has a fiat reward element. It's in your token, right? But if it's $250 per million and someone's paying that and you're minting a token at the same time, then whatever you're paying out a fiat-based price, but in your token.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I should add that we're thinking, this isn't super public yet, but internally, and I mentioned maybe on one of our internal community calls that we have, is that we're also exploring using stablecoins as the medium of exchange and decoupling the medium of exchange from security of the network. So the current Pocket token would become more like a share, like you own a share of the network, and then depending on and then we use actual stablecoins to process requests and pay people out, and shareholders would get a percentage of the stablecoin because it becomes much easier to think about, and it also decouples network security from the actual costs to use the network. Which, if we're looking at where we are today with a lot of altcoins hitting all-time lows due to market conditions, a lot of networks are really easy to attack with like $10 million at this point. Not that everyone has that laying around, but technically you could do that. And this is the benefit of having survived and been around for so long, is you see things that you don't see at the inception of a project, and living through, having this project go through 2 cycles of leadership or 3 cycles of leadership, and through the benefit of seeing what new technologies have been invented, and seeing that stablecoins are basically the primary PMF for the crypto space right now, at least in my humble opinion. Being built on Cosmos and having access to something like Noble, which can mint their own stablecoins on a Cosmos-based chain, which is what the new version of Pocket is, does enable you to decouple security from medium of exchange and help you think about the project differently. So this is something we are considering, but it's very raw.
Well, listen, I love the idea. I mean, what we've done is sort of has some similarities where I guess we only reward our nodes in our token. It resets to a target $10 per core per month. But once there's a customer the customer pays in stablecoin, and then the operators receive that payment in stablecoin, and then it's sent to people in that. So our reward in our token is just for basically the proof of compute. And then on the stake side, for its ever worth, we have stake that is denominated in fiat but paid in token. So it's 12,000 per core, right? So the price goes down. When it's time to reset, you got to add more FLT. Price goes up, you need less FLT. But a view that an arbitrary amount of tokens per core, your security model is based on a crypto market to some extent, right? And that's like a bit of you're taking a risk as you no doubt mentioned. So I totally grasp that as a risk factor.
Yeah, I actually have many questions about your market. I'm not sure if it's good for now or after this podcast, but I do have a couple questions on how
Fair
that
enough.
operates.
We can talk about that later. But I'm fascinated. So how then, in terms of requests, I see where you're going with that. And so you think you have the appropriate infrastructure now to handle that, or you need to scale with more providers to get to where you think you can go to 2 to 5 million of revenue?
We are over collateralized still.
Right.
And that's for having minted so much supply over the course of 5 years. We will be over collateralized for a long time to come. I think I think the network can handle something like 50 billion requests per day. And we are doing, at our peak, we were doing over 2 billion. Right now, we are comfortable at 500 million, 600 million. Comfortable meaning that's what we're seeing day to day. That's what I meant by comfortable. But we can do way more. So yeah, I'm not super worried about it. We can scale. The limitation is going to be not even at the network. It's going to be at the gateway or the sovereign operator providing demand to see if their infrastructure can actually process those requests, right? Because you have load balancers that need to balance it. So like a lot of issues that we have seen from like an optics perspective is like, oh, Pocket's not working. But the answer is no. Grove's infrastructure just didn't scale fast enough at that time. So this is the benefit of having multiple gateway operators using Pocket, because at the end of the day, we decouple our infrastructure from Pocket, the net with a protocol. And B, this isn't what the business that we want to be in. Like, we want to be in the business of expanding access to Pocket, not the business of being the sole driver of Pocket. Otherwise, this whole decentralized thesis doesn't really play out.
Fair enough. I get it. And so how important do you think Pocket is in terms of ultimate scale for this industry, and where do you want to go in 5 years? Help us understand kind of where you think it all goes.
So I have, I don't know. I wouldn't say so. I have a very jaded view, right? I'm sure everyone who's been through this industry has somewhat of a jaded view. So I feel like blockchains have PMF in stablecoins and in prediction markets, and hybrid blockchains seem to have found PMF in supply chains. Like I forgot what it's called, Hyperledger, I think is the example there. But when it comes to, do we need to have 300 blockchains or a bunch of different rollups? I don't know. So what I actually believe is what Pocket's solution here is for inference. And I can't take credit for this. My co-founder and our CTO and our head of the protocol, Daniel O'Shaughnessy, he had this idea like shortly after ChatGPT came out. So in early 2023, he's like, wait, Pocket can process more than just RPC. We can process RPC is just a form of a request. We can process other types of RPC requests, not just, or we can process any type of request or generalized data transport. And then I'm looking at the inference market, and the inference market is, the TAM for that is going to explode year over year, because everything is going to have AI built into it. And some of that stuff will happen locally on local LLMs, but for the bigger projects, they're going to need to access remote LLMs. So my belief is Pocket does need to exist. I think the actual target demographic for Pocket is not a human. It's actually an AI agent or an AI operator who can access on-chain metrics and then also infer things and create chain of thought processes, either directly or off-chain through Monte Carlo simulations and models, and actually solve the problems they need. But these agents need to have access to permissionless rails. What Pocket ends up being is a playground that enables access to stables or prediction markets or DEXs or what have you on the crypto side for any blockchain that you want. And on the LM side, it provides you access to any model that you want, where you can continuously infer what it is that you need to do and operate. And you can all do it with one universal token, be it Pocket, or in the future, maybe Pocket USD if we have a stablecoin. And so all you have to do as a creator is create an agent, load your agent up with access to a wallet, or top it up with, give it a couple grand and then let it go ham. So I think we are very, I know this is cliche, I think we're still early, because I think our target demographic is just being built, right? It's like, doesn't fully exist yet. And it's weird to have that realization.
And it didn't exist when the network was created. It wasn't even on the realm of possibility, but now what you built, the infrastructure you built, is very applicable to this new world that's growing enormously, and that presents a lot of opportunity for you, right?
Exactly right. Yeah. I mean, it's insane to me. Like, I had this realization. I was listening to, I don't know if you listen to the All In podcast with Chamath and what's it called? Jake Howell and a few others.
It was what's the David Sachs as well, etc.
David Sachs, yeah, and David Friedman. And something he had said like last summer clicked. Like, he said it, and it created this earworm about the future world just being run by agents. And then I got into this whole hole about like, how do agents access X, Y, and Z? And then I'm like, I figured out like, oh, POKT can just do this. And then I talked to my partner, and then he figured out a piece of it. And we basically like, okay, we're actually building for this customer, which just started to exist, right? With the Virtuals protocol and OLAS, and Valerie's another set of protocol, OLAS, or Valerie's the protocol, I think. And there's a few others that are doing this right now, but I still think like what these could be used for, it's not fully there yet. Everyone's still experimenting, right? Everyone's still experimenting on the money side. Like, how can you build an agent to like be a hedge fund manager for you is basically what I think we are right now. And people are, I mean, OLAS is a customer of ours, a public customer of ours, and they use us exactly for that. They create DeFi bots for specific types of transactions and chains, and they use us exactly that way. So they, for me, are the first type of ideal customer we're building for.
Really, and that market, that is just going to, only go one way for a long time. Really interesting.
Correct. So the goal for us right now is to start, I'm in the BD mode, trying to start sell to our existing customer base, because we only have a bunch of blockchains. The LLMs are just kind of in a test mode. But this summer, I'm basically going to be turning off the crank and going up to all of the crypto/AI projects, because they're our next target demographic. But they're still not the ideal target demographic for me.
Well, help us. If you've been in this space for a while, for a long time, you evolved, POKT evolved kind of your role in there as well. What other DePIN projects do you pay attention to? Who else do you think is interesting that you want to call out, solving hard problems or a useful service?
I just really want Helium to succeed. I love the idea. Like, I really love, and I also love Solana, right? I used to do iOS apps, and for me, Solana has all the makings of like the iOS versus Android, Solana versus Ethereum thing. I just really want Helium to succeed. I think it's like the coolest use case and the most obvious use case for like physical presence DePIN, right? Because we're like digital presence, what I think you and I, like what Fluence and POKT are doing. But for physical presence, I think that is cool. I think Hive Mapper is pretty cool too. But for me, it's like, I just really want Helium to succeed. Not that I'm a Helium customer, so I'm not helping, but the idea of it is phenomenal to me.
Well, and it inspired a large number of DePIN projects. There's a lot of founders who've been on here that learned about it through Helium, and it's very intuitive. It makes sense. I actually launched a mini network in Mexico of spots. I think it was a little late to it, unfortunately, but at least I did my part to try to get it up and running over there. Well, how do people follow you? How do they follow POKT? How do they get involved? Like, help us, understand how they get involved.
Yeah. So for me, it's for POKT, it's POKT Network on X. And Grove is Build with Grove on X. And if you follow us there, we update periodically. Obviously, same thing for LinkedIn. POKT.network, or POKT the right way, POKT.network is the website. Grove.city is our website. Funny enough, there's a Grove City in Pennsylvania, so we get a lot of funny spam messages. And for me personally, I'm, like everyone here, like forever on X all the time. And Telegram. But it's ARTSABINTSEV. So Art Sabintsev on both platforms. How you reach me.
Awesome. Well, listen, thank you very much for being on. I look forward to having you back on when the transition is complete and you are serving a large number of LLMs and agents, and making that world even more resilient and accessible.
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity, and I look forward to coming back on here in a year or two when all this is live.
Fantastic. Thanks, Arthur.
Thank you.
The DePINedPodcast, the place where we explore real world use cases unlocked by crypto. That's all for today. Thanks for watching to the end. If you enjoyed this episode, please help us grow. Add a like, add a comment. And of course, if you have anyone you think we should be talking to or have on this podcast, either leave a comment there or reach out. But thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.